Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Onyx Tavern. This is your host, the Barkeep, bringing you podcast 37 here at the Tavern, presented by HeroTaku.com. And once again, I am joined by my illustrious colleague, Raptor.
Yep, good to be here as usual.
Yes. Now, before we get started with today's topic, Raptor, you are made aware, and I'm sure everybody who is a subscriber to my channel is aware of the issue I'm having with the copyright strike and the 15-minute limit. So, just to give you guys a head up, this video will be artificially made into 2, 3, however many videos it'll take to get this whole thing done. But I will also mention to everybody that I will make an attempt to create an audio file all by itself without any video to it and try to have a downloaded link for you guys. So if you would like to listen to the Tavern uninterrupted, that option will be there for you.
Yeah, probably have a link below, I don't know.
Once I figure that out, and since Thanksgiving break is this week, I have all night to figure that out. I got nothing to do tomorrow.
Envious.
Yes. Well, Raptor, what are we talking about tonight?
All right, tonight, this is a suggestion by a friend of ours named Sincere McMichael, and he wanted us to talk about the gap in between the end of Zeo and Turbo, a Power Rangers movie.
Yes, because the interesting thing about it, there is nothing there. You watch the last episode of Zeo, and things kind of wrap up. King Mondo is destroyed by Zed. Rita and Zed say, hey, we're coming back now. Bulk and Skull go off to France on some secret mission. And everything looks hunky-dory. Jason lost his powers and got with Emily and all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly, like that, there's a movie and no explanation of anything on how we got to that point.
Yeah, there was exactly one reference to the Zeo powers.
Mm-hmm.
And that was only for a few seconds. And other than that, nothing.
Yes, because basically what that happened is they went into the movie. They went in knowing that it's from Zeo. Don't make any real reference to Zeo. It almost seems like a reboot in that regard, I guess.
Soft reboot,
yeah. But there's no explanation of things such as why are the Zeozords not as powerful to defeat Malagor? Why did Jason leave Angel Grove when he really didn't? Why did Zed and Rita not return? All these questions, that have been around since that period. And what Raptor and I are going to go ahead and do is we're going to talk primarily about, what kind of happened, what kind of speculation that we've heard. Specifically, we will talk about Scorpion Reign, kind of in broad strokes, and then just kind of give our opinion on the whole matter.
Now, it's worth noting that from a production standpoint, the reason that the references to Zeo were minimal was because they wanted to attract lapsed fans back to the movie, and so they decided to minimize continuity references and give the movie, for the most part, a blank slate.
Yes, and I think they succeeded in that, but I think it only alienated long-term fans. Because let's keep in mind, Power Rangers have been around for about 4 years at this point, and I don't know what a child's retention is nowadays. But you know what? I was, until my brother, who was actually leaving Power Rangers because he was in the Beetleborgs, of all things at the time, he was able to follow the movie, even though he didn't really follow Zeo, obviously they did that, but the question I would have is, why didn't they have anything after Zeo? Obviously, they have full episode count, and they left it on, I wouldn't so much say as a cliffhanger as what DS9 would say, a promise of things to come, particularly Zed and Rita coming back.
Yes.
They didn't lose any of their powers, other than Jason, but that was just given back to Trey. They didn't lose any Zords. They didn't use any Zords in that last episode.
Yeah, strangely enough.
Yeah, and it did not feel like an actual ending to Zeo as much it was as an ending to Jason's return to Power Rangers.
Yeah, and to a lesser extent, the end of the Machine Empire.
Yes, and that is a major thing, but to be honest, didn't really feel like it at the time. As somebody who watched it during his live broadcast, I didn't feel like, oh, we're never going to see these guys again. I knew we would see them at some point.
Well, that's because within the series itself, a standard was set for rebuilding.
Exactly, because that had happened to Mondo previously, just took a long time. And of course, they were conscious at the end. They were able to talk smack to Lord Zed, basically. But, Raptor, given the movie, so the movie did its own approach. But why do you think that there was this gap? Why is it that you think that they didn't have an episode that led into the movie? Like an episode says, to be continued in Turbo, a Power Rangers movie. Because they did that with Power Rangers and Turbo and Power Rangers in Space. To be continued in Power Rangers in Space.
Right. And I think that was mostly because the decision to minimize continuity references was made after the time when they would have made a to be continued episode.
So you're saying that they had already written and produced the episode, but by the time it came to write and produce the movie, they decided to eliminate references?
Yes, my general idea is that when they completed Good as Gold, they were set on the idea that they would bridge it within Turbo. But then when Turbo went into production, and when Good as Gold had probably already been aired, they decided, nah, we're going to back off from that continuity thing.
Now here's the thing, is that I don't have much to say because this is really all speculation, because I have never heard of any, I've never heard of any official word as to why. And that's the weird thing about this topic, is that it's brought up, but nobody really talks about it except for Scorpion Rain, which we'll get to here in a minute. And, we're in the age of the internet where there are people who interview actors and producers now, and it's never a question that I hear from interviews.
There was one reference to it from Johnny Young Bosch. He stated in an interview that the original cut of the movie was over 3 hours long and featured a battle where the Zeozords were destroyed.
Yeah, now we mentioned that when we did the Turbo commentary. But would you say that battle would necessitate? I can't talk tonight. Would that be enough in a 3-hour cut to really explain everything? Because I almost feel that with all that was set up, it would need an episode or two, and you couldn't jam that into a movie.
I think you honestly take out some of that filler in the movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of filler,
and you could have a nice 10 to 20 minute sequence where Divatox does a full-scale attack, sends out a giant monster, and then the Rangers call the Zeozords get trashed, and then that necessitates new powers.
But I also wonder what the producers thought, because, again, in film school, we go into screenwriting, and we understand that there are certain things you have to do to bring your audience in, to catch your audience up to speed if it's an ongoing series. Now, nobody can convince me that Turbo was meant to be a fresh starting point for fans, simply because of the baggage that it brings along with it. And I don't necessarily see that as being, again, a good starting point. I mean, here's the thing. If they intended not to do anything with Zeo and then go into the movie, it should have been a complete break somehow. I don't know how you would do that, but the movie is made in such a way that there is no complete break. That we do have these elements that are left over that we have to explain away in the movie without explaining them away.
Yes. Honestly, that clean break they were looking for, they got that halfway through the series.
And here's another thing. Here's another thought as well. Does a 3-hour cut necessarily tell us why there's a new command center? Why Alpha has a different look? Could a 3-hour cut explain why Bulk and Skull didn't go to France? Hell, a throwaway line would have been appreciated in that subplot.
Yeah. All right. You remind me of something. Let's take a moment to list out everything that was unaccounted for by the time that Turbo was released.
Okay, well, there's Jason's status. I mean, It's indicated he left Angel Grove at the end of Zeo and doesn't really have a good reason because, again, he's got Emily, wants to stay with Emily, so that's one thing. Bulk and Skull were offered to go to Paris and be undercover operas with Inspector Clouseau, which is a great joke when you're older and think about it. The Machine Empire was destroyed, and Lord Zed and Rita said that they would be back.
And I think that was it.
That was about it. Those are like three major things that should be followed up on in something. Because here's the thing: if they would have done our episode, Jason would have just disappeared because he was a full regular at that point in the series.
Yes. So then, come Turbo, we have Jason returning to Angel Grove as if he had left.
However long it's been.
Bulk and Skull are back with no mention of their mission.
And somehow rehired on the police force, despite the fact that in Bulk fiction they got fired. I don't know why they're not back in the detective's office, because that's what Stone was doing at the time, is he was detective, which I thought that was a lot better than them being police officers. I love their detective subplot.
And yeah, then of course we have minimal references to the Zeo powers and the Zeo Zords.
The Machine Empire's not in there. Rita and Zed make a 1 minute cameo.
Yeah, 1 minute cameo where they never followed up in the slightest on their, return.
Exactly. So I mean, you have things that you established, and I know it's by two different writers, and obviously two different production crews, but somebody wasn't getting the memos, I think. I almost feel that there was no communication that led to this, that maybe they felt Zeo was in a different point to where it was, to where maybe the film was written before they had a clear idea of what good as Gold would be like.
And that's entirely possible. I mean...
And unfortunate, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, we probably should have checked the dates, because if you think about the time it takes to produce and shoot a movie, and, if we line that up with when Good as Gold was aired...
Well, considering Good as Gold, Steve Cardenas does not appear in the episode except morphed. There is a line of dialogue saying that he's away at karate camp.
Yes, and...
So, I mean, you can even tell at the tail end of Zeo, there are a handful of episodes in which Rocky is not present or plays a minimal role in it.
Right, and that was, of course, because he injured himself. We talked about that before.
Yeah.
Most fans know this. Moving on.
Yeah. So, there isn't too much to go ahead and speculate on this matter. So, what I would like to go ahead and do is let's go ahead and talk about Scorpion Reign.
Yes.
And we will go ahead and talk about Scorpion Reign in part 2 of the video. So, see you guys in part 2.
That was for your use.
And now, welcome back to part 2 of podcast 37 here at the Tavern. So Raptor and I, first of all, guys, sorry about the time limit thing. That's something I really can't control here. Yeah, but we definitely want to go ahead and talk about Scorpion Reign, give it enough time that it deserves here. So for those of you who don't know what Scorpion Reign is, here's what it is in a nutshell. Amit Bhaumek, who eventually became a writer on Power Rangers, particularly in Wild Force, conceived of a hoax in which there was a 5-part string of episodes, which explained what happened between the end of Zeo Good as Gold and the Turbo movie. Now, specifically what happened was that Lord Zed and Rita came back, they battled Goldar and Rito and the Zeo Zords. Serpentera, I think, was mentioned as far as like being damaged or at least in an attack.
Yes.
And the Zeo Zords were destroyed.
Yes, and Serpentera gets sunk, falls into the ocean, which is weird considering that Amit Bhaumek...
And we'll get to that point here in a minute. But basically, part of the hoax is that not only was it 5 parts, but it was only aired in Australia, and that it was done with no Sentai footage, and supposedly all the scenes were done with toys, the American toys, a la what they did with the Shogun Ultrazord in Season 3.
Yes.
Now, the weird thing is, so many people back in the day, and this started about 98, 99 on the news groups, at least the link that we found to it, and people believed into it.
And by the way, we'll put a link to the news group discussion below.
Yeah, and for somebody who had just discovered the internet at that time, I'm going to be honest, I didn't believe it. Because I thought to myself, and this is, again, also before I knew Power Rangers was a Japanese thing that came from Japanese source material. I'm like, why would they show it only in Australia? Because even as a naive, how old was I, 12, 13, something like that, I'm like, this can't, Yeah, I know. This can't be right. This doesn't make any sense. Why does it happen? And of course, this was an age before YouTube, but yeah, I didn't believe it for a minute. But the fact that so many people did believe it, not to an insult to their intelligence, but I guess just more of a testament to way rumors spread early internet.
Also, I would argue that people wanted to believe such a thing existed because they liked the idea of a continuity bridge.
And the fact that it involved Serpentera and the Zeozords and Golar coming back and all that, those are elements that were sorely missing from Zeo, that were definitely expanded upon. So, if anything, Emmett Bomick really,
He wrote fan fiction.
yeah, I would say it's fan fiction, but he writes it to a degree where it is believable, and of course, it gets published in the episodes. So,
Yeah, and speaking of YouTube, we have done some searches because Scorpion Reign is supposedly broken up into 5 parts.
yes.
However, those parts, supposedly, are only a few minutes long.
Yes.
The entire thing together is just supposedly over 8 minutes.
Which is odd for a 5-part episode.
Yes, considering that's not even half the length of a regular episode.
Yeah, and I think the idea is it was akin to one of those little bumpers that they
Yeah.
had for Zeo.
And from what we've been searching, we have only been able to find the supposed part 5.
Yes, which involves really bad dubbers, poor quality image, and it's just wow. If they were trying to pass this off as a real episode, they really thought people would be gullible.
We'll put that in the links.
We're gonna have a lot in the.
But yeah,
in the
take a look.
section.
It's hilariously bad.
Yeah. So, and of course, as has been established by Linkara for a couple of things, is that one, he does not consider it canon, despite the fact that Emmett Bomick considers it canon when he wrote Forever Red, because apparently the only line from that episode that was put into the consciousness of Power Ranger fans was, "Man, that is one ugly Zord."
Which Tommy, of course, says in Forever Red.
Exactly. He repeats the same line that he had said
Got the
before.
Same robot.
So, Raptor, I'm going to pose this question to you. Let's forget about the video we saw. Let's forget that it's a hoax and all that kind of stuff. Given that Emmett Bomick is an official Power Rangers source, and that he went into writing Forever Red with that in continuity, what do you feel about the canonicity of those actual events? That Lord Zanria did come back, did destroy the Zeozords, and that led to the events of Turbo. How do you feel about that actually being part of continuity?
I'm okay with it. I mean, I don't like it. It's kind of a piece of shit from what I saw from that video. But it was in the hands of an official canon writer.
Mhm.
No one disputes the canonicity of the Wild Force episodes that he wrote.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, he was basically given the opportunity to make his fan fiction canon, and he had authority, so it works.
I guess my concern would be is that Scorpion Reign does not tie into Forever Red, and it doesn't give a satisfactory connection to the Turbo movie. Because let's consider, the Rangers have the Zeo powers in the Zeo movie and switch them out for the Turbo powers and make new Zords. Even if he had destroyed the Zeo Zords in Power Rangers or in Scorpion Reign, that is not enough to justify the Turbo
New
powers.
suits, yes.
It doesn't justify any of that. If it was the destruction of the Zeo powers, I would believe it, but that can't be true given what we see with Catherine.
Because Kat and Tommy years later.
Exactly. So,
from purely a speculation standpoint,
Mhm.
I would think that I'm assuming that the Turbo Zords used a different power source.
there are a lot of speculations on it. And of course, as we'd say, Billy was supposed to be the creator of the Turbo Zords. That's supposedly what he was doing throughout Zeo when the whole red herring about who the Gold Ranger was.
Yes, so my guess is that they're a different power source, therefore they could not have used the Zeo crystal to power them, therefore they would need to have powers that are derived from the same power source as the Zords, therefore they needed new suits.
Yeah, but what about Super Zeo gems?
I don't know.
Yeah, well, in any case, I would say it's not canon just based on those factors alone because it doesn't really explain anything. And again, if it is tying into Forever Red, I believe, again, what we read is the Serpentera fell into the ocean. So unless you want to loosely say that the
Yes,
Sea of Tranquility is the, quote, ocean, then yeah.
yeah, that's a hard thing because if this is supposedly Amit Bamik's own continuity, he's violating his own personal continuity.
Exactly, which is pretty bad, I would go ahead and say. But, again, there isn't too much to say on this topic because there is no information out there, and that's what really
It's an
bothers
8-minute
me.
video. It's not...
Well, not even Scorpion Reign in general. I know that's what we've been talking about in this segment, but just overall, this gap. And I've never really heard, and you can tell me otherwise, people who are really saying to themselves, hey, we need to know what happened. You guys need to tell us. I don't see them hounding the writers, the producers to go back and fill in those gaps. So my question to you is it necessary that we must know what happened?
Well, if you want me to be completely honest with you,
Mm-hmm.
I think since Turbo is the undisputed black sheep of Power Rangers, there are other seasons that fans will consistently rank at the bottom.
Yep.
But no season is as unanimously disliked as Turbo.
And I will concede to that, yeah.
And most fans would prefer to think Turbo didn't happen.
Yeah.
And therefore, they don't really care how Zeo, a rather well-liked season, transitioned into that.
So basically what you're saying is that it doesn't really matter because it wouldn't add anything to make Turbo better or to the overall mythos of the series.
Yes, and if anything, it could make Zeo look worse. Because if we went with what happened in the original cut of the film, if Johnny Young Bosch is to be believed, I don't see why he wouldn't. But
yeah, it's Johnny Young Bosch.
If say the Zeo Zords would have gotten trashed by Divatox, nobody likes Divatox.
Yeah,
and so these Zeo Zords, which are pretty well liked,
yeah, and very powerful if we were to believe the perpetual energy.
Yes, it would just make fans mad to imagine Divatox doing that.
But I think film wise, it would give credibility to her character, where there really is very little to begin with.
If she was as annoying as she was in the film, I think it'd just make people mad.
Yes. Now I will say this. I mean, I really want to know what happened, but here's the fact. It's what 15 years too late to really do anything about it.
Yeah.
In a live action adaptation,
this could ever happen with would be a comic.
And I'm thinking a comic, novel, animated short, something to explain it. And I would say something like the 20th or 25th anniversary, which is 25 and 20 is also really special. That maybe this could be revisited somewhere. Maybe Scorpion Reign could be actually made into a short, again, otherwise cartoon or something like that, to just kind of give that extra story. I can't think of any other franchise that has gone back and retconned by adding episodes in there. I mean, we know in Star Trek they'll retcon, say, oh, this is where the Defiant went. It went to the Mirror Universe and things like that. But I've never seen Star Trek add extra episodes of, like, say, the original series. I have
seen it happen, though, with that show that you keep refusing to watch.
He's referring to Doctor Who, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, for the 50th anniversary.
Which was last Saturday.
Yeah, I'm not going to spoil most of the events, but there was a new Doctor. You're familiar with the concept that he regenerates.
Yes.
A new Doctor was introduced in between the 8th and 9th. So, and just to put that in perspective, the current Doctor is 11th.
Okay.
And they inserted this guy as a way to explain the events of an off-screen until the anniversary, but an event called the Time War. Which was
a big deal, I take it, in the actual
series.
Yes,
it was threatened to destroy the entire universe.
Okay.
So, anyways, for a mini-sode leading into the film, they brought back the actor who played the Eighth Doctor, and the Eighth Doctor was last seen in a film in the mid-90s. And they brought him in and made an episode where he regenerated into what's called the War Doctor, which is the new one that they made for the special.
So basically what you're saying is they, in terms of Power Rangers, if I put in this context, they went back and made Scorpion Rain.
Essentially, yes. Except there was no fan hoax to build off of.
Absolutely. And I think that, that is something to be explored with Amit Bhaumek if he returns as a writer. I mean, because he's not a writer right now. Otherwise, Megaforce wouldn't be crap.
Right.
But yeah, so...
And so, yeah, we really have little to work off of.
It was a request that we wanted to honor to Sincere Michael. Yeah.
I would propose that we do one more part where we talk about our own theories of what happened. Because you say Scorpion Rain's not canon. So let's talk about, in part 3, what you think actually happened.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, with this new format, we are now trying part 3 of this video. So stay tuned for that. And now we are back with part 3 of this video. I tell you, Raptor, I just kind of like the idea where we just ramble on for half an hour, and now I have to add all this in. So it's going to be a labor of love, but thank you, YouTube.
I made it easy.
Hey, I'm not saying... Okay, so... I apologize for the awkward transitions right there, but again, just getting used to this. But what Raptor wants to do is talk about our speculations on what happened. And, Raptor, I'm very curious to hear what you have to say. So, as always, please go first.
Okay. Well, as for my own personal theory, I think that, I'm just making this up on the spot, that the Zeo crystal may have grown too powerful for its own good.
Okay.
And perhaps it broke itself, which would have, perhaps it still allowed the Rangers to morph, because we saw that happen twice, post-Zeo. And, however, it made their Zords unusable.
Okay, because the power source of the Zords is technically Zeo Crystal, which is those little crystals they get from the Morphers, and that's powered by their Zeo Crystals. Okay, so I can see where you're going with that.
Sort of like when at the beginning of Season 2, the Rangers had their Zords destroyed, but they could still morph.
Yes, but the Zords and the morphing were not tied in.
They weren't tied in?
Well, until the second season, but that's a whole other thing to get into.
So my theory is that something similar happened during that gap, and maybe I can say there's a retcon. That's why they didn't bring the Zords in for the last battle. Forget that whole "there's no time" comment.
Yeah, which is hilarious, but it's actually one of my favorite scenes in Power Rangers.
I mean, yeah, it's very unique
because it's a great reverse. They're growing to fight giant robots.
Yeah, that's fun.
Yes.
So yeah, basically summed up, my theory is that the Zords became unusable because too powerful, and that necessitated new Zords. But these new Zords used a new power source.
Which is obviously from the morphing grid, but not really substantiate what that is. Because, of course, later seasons would say we got it from the morphing grid, but that's not really a power source. That's more of an access point to manipulating matter, I think.
No. Well, actually, it depends on what definition you want to go with.
Exactly, and that varies from season to season sometimes. Specifically, I'm thinking of Jungle Fury and RPM.
Yes, but you also have Operation Overdrive, where the morphing grid is a place you can visit, an alternate plane of existence.
Yeah, and that's another video within itself. But
yes.
I definitely understand what you're saying right there is that because it's a perpetual energy source, it became too powerful, could overload the Zords and become an issue that way. Is that
or just make it so they're unusable?
Yeah,
kind of like when you
put AA batteries into a AAA remote or something,
or when you have your computer plugged in, power surge, hit the computer.
That's another thing too.
But please, now share what you think.
I've always wondered, but I have to admit that's one thing I've never really thought about giving an explanation for. Because again,
you don't care either.
I care. It's just that I never thought of rewriting Power Rangers history because I always did have that feeling that something would be explained at some point, whether we would get to an anniversary episode and dialogue would be exchanged or something, which, to be honest, Forever Red would have been a great time to have done that, particularly if they had done the 2 parts that Mitbomic wanted.
There was probably footage shot for it.
And it's out there somewhere. But, if I had to go ahead and make any type of educated guess, if you can call my guesses educated, I would say, all right, I'll tell you this. I read a fanfic years ago, and I can't tell you what the title is, or the name, or even the overall plot, really. I'd almost forgotten about it. But basically, it was a story that took place between Good as Gold and Turbo, where it attempted to explain what happened. And its premise was that Bulk and Skull were kidnapped by aliens for experiments. I believe they were the Horath, which is what Trider was a species of. And that was tied into the overall narrative with the Power Rangers. Their Zords were not destroyed in that, but basically there was like this alien attack that was all tied in basically with Rita and Zed also having to fight them or something of that nature.
Oh, so they had to team up?
I don't think it was that. I think that was the comic, the Zeo comic.
Okay.
That Linkara had reviewed. But it really had something... The whole basis of it is Bulk and Skull's side adventure became a pivotal plot point.
That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. And I imagine that something like that, had it actually been a Power Rangers episode or miniseries or whatever and all that, would tie all those elements together. Because it does seem that Zeo does set up these things, not just to forget about them. Now, let's also point out that Fox was experimenting with a Bulk and Skull spinoff, which, believe it or not, that was actually Skull inherited a hotel, and he and Bulk went to run it.
Where was it? Did they say what it was supposed to be?
Not in Angel Grove.
Not in Angel Grove, I could say.
But, yeah, that's supposedly why they're going to leave, although a Bulk and Skull detective series in France would have been quite interesting.
Yeah, more interesting than Turbo.
Exactly. So that, obviously that might have been a reason to write them out. You had to write Jason out, I guess, because they weren't going to have him in Turbo. I don't know.
He wasn't contracted to return.
Although, if they would have just given Blake Foster's money to Jason, it would have been significantly different.
But no, we need to get a kid to appeal to the kids. That's a dead horse.
Yeah. And then, of course, the Machine Empire with Lord Zed and Rita coming back. I don't know how that was going to go ahead and tie in. I don't know why they set that. Because, again, even if you consider they were the villains in Turbo, it still wouldn't have made any sense in the long run, I think.
It doesn't even make sense with because supposedly is to attract lapsed fans. Well, what would attract lapsed fans like the return of Rita and Zed?
Exactly. Particularly if you made Zed like he was in the first few appearances of the second season. So, again, I don't have any real speculation. I didn't even think we were going to ask that question here tonight. I just made that
theory up right now.
Oh, yeah, and I understand. And I would like to be able to give some actual thought to it. Not that you didn't give any thought to it, just that you know how I am with my theories and stuff like that. So,
yes, you're less likely to improvise than I am.
Yes. But, Raptor, I think ultimately what it comes down to is that we, the fans, were screwed. And I don't think anybody cares anymore. That's the thing that kind of bothers me. And that's what I ultimately have to say about it.
We're the ones who aren't asking about it. You get a few people who write a fan fiction here and there.
Yeah.
But otherwise, no one's cared. No one's asking. You admit that you hadn't even really thought about it. And we didn't even... This wasn't even our idea to make this podcast.
Yeah, and I love discussing such things. It's just that... if one of these days I am going to go ahead and do, I've decided to do like top 10 list of Power Rangers things that I hate. And,
that'd be fun.
And I think this will be on the list because it is one of those things that genuinely does annoy me. Because when you go from season to season, especially in the first 6 seasons, you have to have established continuity. When you go from Lightspeed Rescue to Time Force, you really don't need that because you're establishing different characters, a different scenario.
Yes.
But in this case, unless you're going to do a complete reboot or get brand new characters that was passing the torch, the episode, then I just don't see why they did it the way they did. That's the thing.
Understandable.
So, guys, I wish we had more to go ahead and talk about this, but we definitely wanted to fulfill Sincere's request because he did ask that. And I'd like to think we did a good job given the number of issues right here. So what I ask is, first of all, what do you guys think of the gap between Turbo and Zeo? What do you think about Scorpion Rain? Your opinions on it? Should they go back to it? And also, on a technical note, what do you guys think of this format? Does this work for everybody? Do you like us breaking it up here within these parts? Because unfortunately, I think that's something that's going to have to continue for some time. So.
Yes.
So, Raptor, any parting words that you have?
I envy people who get to incorporate their own fan fiction into continuity. I'm gonna say that. If I ever got to, and you realized I'd do the same thing. If I ever got into some kind of creative capacity on Pokemon, I'd mix in all my theories I've developed over the years, so I can't fault bombing for it.
Nor can I, but I would very much like to see what happens in Power Ranger Writers.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, guys, thank you for listening tonight. Since it's Thanksgiving week, expect a couple more videos to be coming out, just because I have all the free time now. Well, now that I have Arkham Origins, I don't think I'll have that much free time.
Yep.
All right, but thank you for listening tonight. Have a good evening, and the tavern is now closed.